Good evening to everyone. We have visitors here. We're delighted that you've chosen to be with us. As you heard in Andrew's prayer, we're studying about the kings of Israel. We're in the divided kingdom, and right now we're focusing specifically on the northern kingdom at this point in the quarter. We'll add in the interactions with the southern kingdoms a little bit as we go, but primarily we're focusing on the northern kingdom. The picture here today is the Jordan Plain as it heads towards Jericho, and of course the point of that is our lesson today. We'll spend a good bit of time down there as we see Elijah and Elisha walk down that way for Elijah to make his departure from this earth. So again, real people, real places, real events that we're looking at here. I wanted to start tonight with the other portion of the memory work, not what we did on Sunday with the kings of Israel. You might recall this is one of the verses I put up, and I talked about some synoptic verses, or some synopsis verses, rather, that I thought were helpful for this particular period. This one is 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 4 through 5. We haven't worked on it a lot. I'm not expecting anybody to say it tonight, maybe later if you want to. But it reads, "As for you, if you will walk before me as your father David walked in integrity of heart and in uprightness, doing according to all that I have commanded you, and will keep my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom over Israel forever, just as I promised to your father David, saying, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. But if you or your sons indeed turn away from following me, and do not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land which I have given them, and the house which I have consecrated for my name I will cast out of my sight, so Israel will become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. And this house will become a heap of ruins. Everyone who passes by will be astonished and hiss and say, why has the Lord done thus to this land and to this house? And they will say, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and adopted other gods and worshipped them and served them. Therefore the Lord has brought all this adversity on them." And I like these verses that give us a synopsis of the whole period for a couple of reasons. For one, it allows us to kind of pull our head out of some of the admittedly unique details that we find in this period of the divided kingdom, and maybe we think about a lot, and gives us a high level overview of what we're talking about here. And really the high level overview of that is that God, it's a reminder that God is the perfect covenant keeper. If God says he's going to do something, you can rest assured that God is going to keep his promise no matter what. And we've seen that several times, both positively and negatively. And so that's a good reflection of that. And so all that we've seen so far this quarter, the things that have happened to Israel, the positive things that will happen to Judah as we study them, and then the negative things, those are all just God keeping his part of the covenant despite what man is doing. So I think that's useful for us and for if you're teaching your own children or you're teaching a Bible class of the same thing. So keep that passage in mind. Maybe start working on it a verse or two at a time, and I think it will be useful to you. I'd like to go finish a little bit of chapter, or of lesson 4 rather. We were talking about Ahab's death in his battle against Aram or Syria. And we've talked about Jehoshaphat's foolish alliance where he came down and he allied with Ahab. My people are as your people, my horses are as your horses. Micaiah's prophecy of doom, and still, despite all of that, they go to war, right? They go to war, and Ahab disguises himself. The Syrians are instructed to fight only with Ahab. Find Ahab and only find him and kill him. And Ahab goes in disguise thinking he will prevent that. But of course he does not. And it says, and now a certain man drew his bow at random and struck the king of Israel in the joint of the armor. So he said to his chariot driver, turn around and take me out of the fight, for I am severely wounded. The battle raged that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot in front of the Arameans and died at evening, and the blood from the wound ran into the bottom of the chariot. And as he died there at evening, and they brought him back to Samaria, it says, so the king died and was brought to Samaria, and it was there at the pool of Samaria that the dogs licked up the blood, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke. But if you remember when we talked about on Sunday, that was not exactly the prophecy that Elijah gave. The prophecy was what? Yeah, the original prophecy was the same place where Naboth has his blood shed, when licked up, that's where your blood will be licked up by the dogs as well. And then we see Ahab had humbled himself, and God offered a reprieve from that and said, that won't happen in your day, that will happen in your son's day. So let's keep an eye out for that as we move forward on that to see when that comes to fruition. And I think the thing I left you to chew on Sunday morning was this passage here. We've been looking mainly at the first Kings account as we go through these northern kings. And it just says there, as the Syrians, as they find, they're looking for someone in royal robes, they're looking for King Ahab, and they see someone, so they pursue him. It's really Jehoshaphat. He says he cries out, and they saw that it wasn't him, and they turned away. If we look at the Chronicles account, we get a little more there. It says, but Jehoshaphat cried out, and the Lord helped him, and God diverted them from him. So putting that statement in the context of what has happened, Jehoshaphat's character and what we know about him. Of course, we'll study him here in a little bit. But just the context of his bad decision to go there with Ahab in the first place. What do you make of this? What does this say about God? What does this say about Jehoshaphat? Am I asking you to read my mind?
Well, it says, for one thing, that God respected or had respect for Jehoshaphat. And even in times of trouble, when we get ourselves in trouble, sometimes God provides that way of escape.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm trying to get at with this example and this verbiage that is put in here, is God was not pleased with what Jehoshaphat had done, but yet Jehoshaphat, as the Bible says, had set his heart to seek the Lord. He had a relationship with God. So even in those times where he's made a bad decision, the first place that Jehoshaphat is going to look when he's in trouble is what? He's going to cry out to God. And God, knowing Jehoshaphat and knowing what Jehoshaphat's trying to do, not seeing that he's perfect, is willing to reach out and provide some assistance to him there. And this is not the only time that we're going to see this type of relationship between the two of them. So I think it speaks something to God's character, and I think it speaks something to Jehoshaphat's reputation with God. Stephen?
I think it also points out the distinction of purpose between the two accounts. Because in the second, in Chronicles, it is all about instilling in the people, if you will cry out, God will hear. And so it highlights that element. Versus the first one, which is more about failure.
Yeah. I think definitely so that in the Chronicles account, that's also something that the original readers could look back and see. God is wanting to help you, even if you're making some mistakes. He's willing and able to help you if you'll turn to him. Good point. Other comments there about Jehoshaphat? Brad?
Maybe, we have in the temptations of Jesus, the devil misusing Psalm 91, but perhaps this is a specific example of what Psalm 91 is trying to convey. He who dwells in the secret place of the Almighty shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And of course, further down the part that the devil quotes, in their hands they shall bear you up lest you dash your foot against the stones. This is one of those times where God bears him up lest he dash his foot against the stones. So, of course, if we keep reading, we're going to see Jacob come to him and say,
yes.
The prophet, and say, what you just did was not good. And yes. You're on thin ice right now.
Yeah. And Jehoshaphat's going to, when we study the southern kingdom, Jehoshaphat's going to respond to that positively, that admonition. Good point. So I just wanted to bring that out as we bring this lesson on the end of Ahab to a close, and we're going to move on to his descendants now. Remember, this is really the first dynasty that we're seeing here in the northern kingdom, where there's more than just a father and a son reigning. So tonight we'll look at Ahaziah and Jehoram and how Elisha is succeeding Elijah in that. Before we do that, as I said, since we're moving past Ahab now, I wanted you to look at this family tree and kind of get those names fixed in your minds. We're getting into the area now where the names are the same and they're ruling at the same time, and so trying to keep that straight. So we have Ahaz and Jezebel that are married, and it's Ahab's son Ahaziah that's going to be king first. And he's not going to reign very long. We're going to cover that here in just a second. And he has no son. So it's Jehoram, his brother, that is going to reign in his stead. And then the sister is Athaliah, and through marriage and an alliance with Jehoshaphat, Athaliah will be married to Jehoram. So hopefully this picture will help you get your names straight and clear in your mind, but also will show you, in particular, Jezebel's influence as it reaches down through her family, and then as it reaches across into another kingdom, and all of the evil that will be wrought because of her influence. So just keep that in mind. If you will, open to 2 Kings chapter 1, 2 Kings chapter 1. We'll look at these first 3 chapters tonight, and we're going to talk about Ahaziah's sickness. Ahaziah is going to reign for about 2 years. Likely that is probably some sort of co-regency with his father Ahab, and so when Ahab dies, it's not going to be much longer after that before Ahaziah himself dies. He reigns a short period of time, and I think a good chunk of that was probably while his father was still alive. But we find from the king's account here that he had fallen through a window in the upper chamber, and he was injured enough where he didn't know if he was going to be made survive that or not. So he sends to inquire, but he sends to inquire to Beelzebub of Ekron, the pagan god there. Elijah is sent by God to address that, and God tells him, but the angel, in verse 3 says, but the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria and say, is it because there is no God in Israel that you're going to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore, thus says the Lord, you shall not come down from the bed where you've gone up, but you shall surely die. So Elijah delivers this message. Again, Ahaziah has sent messengers to Ekron to find this out, but they come back so quickly, he knows they haven't been to Ekron. And they said, well, a man spoke this to us. And he said, what does this man look like? And they described it, and he said, that's Elijah. So he takes a captain, and that captain's 50, and he says, I want you to go bring Elijah to me. And so he sends that to happen. Question 2 in your material, how does God demonstrate that Elijah was his prophet?
First off, when the 50 showed up and said, the king says, come here now, well, God strikes them dead with fire. When the second 50 come and say the same thing, while they're looking around, looking at 50 charred bodies, God does the same thing to them. And so people who can call fire from heaven are usually God.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the first time they say, come down, and he says, if I am really a man of God, I'm going to send, fire, God is going to send fire from heaven and consume you, and that's exactly what happens. Ahaziah sends another group, and he says, come down quickly, and the same thing happens. The third group that comes, again, perhaps seeing all the bodies that are strewn around, comes a little bit differently, with a little bit different meaning in the word, in the phrase, man of God. Man of God, please have mercy. I see what is going on here. I see these other groups that have been burned. Please see my life, and the life of my 50 is precious. And God says, you can go with this man. And Elijah goes, he repeats the prophecy to Ahaziah, and just as God says, Ahaziah dies as prophesied. So why did the first two captains and their 2 groups of 50, why did they have to die? What was the point of that?
Make the point you don't demand things of God.
Yeah, I think he's trying to demonstrate that Elijah is my messenger, and I'm going to take care of my messenger. And he's not going to be pushed around. You're not going to do with him what you want to do. I'm going to do with him as I want to do. And Ahaziah, of course, died because he didn't show the knowledge that he could have went to God and asked God. He didn't do that. Yes, sir.
The king is not in charge. The king in heaven is in charge.
Yeah.
And that's what comes across so clearly, that incident, both of those incidents, where that unfolds in that way.
Yeah, it shows that God is the one that is in control, and when God supports a messenger, that messenger will be supported and not thwarted. Any other comments there?
The fact that the angel of the Lord says after the third one comes, go down with him, do not be afraid of him, sort of reinforces that idea.
Yeah.
Elijah might have even been in danger at the hands of the first 50.
I do think with those first 2 groups, there was danger implied there. Yeah. Kevin?
It's entirely possible that if they had come back without Elijah, they would have gotten killed. The king would have killed him anyway.
Interesting, yeah. All right. So Ahaziah just reigns 2 years. He falls to that illness, does not recover from his fall, rather, and Jehoram, his brother, is going to reign in his stead. But before we talk about Jehoram, we're going to talk a little bit about Elijah and Elisha. If you look in chapter 2, he's going to be taken up to heaven. He seems to know this. He's being directed by God that he's about to be taken. And so Elisha is following him. And if you look at the path that they're going to take, it's all going to occur down here just at the border of Judah and Israel. He's going to travel from Gilgal over to Bethel and then to Jericho. And then he's going to cross over the Jordan River, and that's where God is going to take him up to heaven. So he goes over there, and as he travels, each time he goes, he says, God has sent me to such and such a place. And he says, I want you to stay here. And Elisha says, no, I'm not staying here. I'm going to go wherever you go. And all the while you have the sons of the prophets following and telling Elisha, don't you know that your master is being taken away from you today? He says, yes, I don't want to hear you say that anymore. I know that's what's going to happen though. And so this goes on and on until they get to the Jordan River. And then Elijah takes his mantle. He strikes the Jordan River. It parts and they cross over. And then question 3 in your material, what request does Elisha make of Elijah? Or actually, Elijah asks the question first, but what's the answer that Elisha gives?
A little portion of his spirit to be put upon.
Yeah. So Elijah says, what can I do for you before I go? And he says, can I have a double portion of the spirit that is on you? So is he asking for twice as many miracles? What is Elisha asking for when he says, can I have a double portion?
Firstborn inheritance.
Yeah, really the firstborn inheritance. A good reference there is Deuteronomy chapter 21, about verse 17 or so. He's saying, I want to be the true, genuine follower of you, Elijah. I want to follow in your path, and I want to be God's messenger like you are. Will that be the case? And Elijah says, that's a difficult thing to ask. If you see me when I leave, then indeed that will be granted to you. So as they walk along, then we see that Elijah and Elisha are parted as a chariot of fire and horses of fire come down from heaven, and they take Elijah and they take him up in a whirlwind. Elisha tears his clothes and he's very distraught at this, and Elijah's mantle falls to the ground. How do we know then whether or not he gets his answer to his question?
1 verse 12 says that Elisha was seeing this.
Yes.
Another verse 2 down, verse 15, the sons of the prophets recognized the spirit of Elijah rests upon Elisha.
Yeah, as Elisha picks up the fallen mantle from Elijah and he strikes the water himself and it divides and he walks over, and so the prophets then see that as well. And the prophets are wanting to go and look for Elijah. They say maybe God has dropped him somewhere before, and that's really a valid concern. You think back to Obadiah's protest when Elijah wanted to leave him before the contest at Mount Carmel, or when he wanted him to go get Ahab, rather, because apparently that was prone to happen, that the Spirit of the Lord would take Elijah and take him somewhere else, and he wouldn't be there when you got back. So they look for 3 days, and they don't find him, and so Elisha is left as the message bearer for God. Elijah was only one of 2 people taken in that we know of that didn't die. The other was Enoch there in Genesis chapter 4. And so then we see Elisha beginning to perform these miracles that again confirm that he is God's messenger. And we actually we will see before we're done, more miracles that he does than we do from Elijah. He has a much closer relationship with, or a much less hostile relationship with the kings of Israel than Elijah does. He's not one that's fleeing for his life. He seems to be in their presence, and they seem to be listening to what he has to say, but we'll see that as we go forward. And so we have a couple of miracles right away that we see that show that he is indeed God's messenger. First, the men at Jericho say that the city is good, but the water is bad, so he takes salt in a jar and he throws it into the spring and says, God says these waters will be clean, and they are that. And then as he's traveling to Bethel, there's a bunch of young men that come out and they begin mocking Elisha, and he turns around and he curses them, and 2 bears come out of the wood and mauls 42 of them. So without a doubt, as they see these things, as they see Elisha part the Jordan River, as they see him purify these waters, as they see him bring about the mauling of these young men, there's no doubt that Elisha now is God's confirmed messenger. And I think that's what God is trying to show through these activities. And so if you think, why did these young people who mocked Elisha perish? What's God trying to say? He's trying to say, this is my messenger. I will protect my messenger, and my messenger will be respected. So, any comments or questions there about Elijah and Elisha? We're gonna, if we have time here at the end of the class, we're gonna step back and look a little more just at Elijah now that we're bringing his work to a close. Hopefully, we'll have time to do that here at the end. But anything in the immediate context? Trevor?
I think one of the things that's interesting about Elisha is it reminds us of Jacob as he was getting ready to meet Esau and not letting go of the angel of the Lord. I'm not going to let go until you bless me.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing to me is that Jacob was doing that out of fear for his own life and his family. Elisha is in no such danger, but he's showing the same determination just so he can be God's servant. And I think that's a tremendous lesson for us to think about. Are we willing to cling to God and hang to Him, not just for our survival, but so that we can serve Him?
Yeah, good point. And Brad?
Go ahead.
The only other connection I was going to make there is when I think about how clearly God is showing that Elisha now is his messenger where Elijah was before. I think of Moses and Joshua and the clear distinction that God made in helping Joshua make that transition after Moses was gone. Go ahead.
We have verse 25. After the mauling of the boys, then Elisha went up from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. I think why we're told that is he sort of following in the footsteps of Elijah, but rather than fleeing down to Mount Horeb, he's just going to march right into the belly of the. I don't.
That's one of those details that I hope that memory verse will pull your head out of, right? So, no, I don't know what the significance of that is. Whether he's going where Elijah has gone before he goes to work. No, I don't think we're told that. Sam, did I?
Well, I think in the story of the youth here, there may be a lesson for us today in how we treat those who proclaim God's word to us, even when it's words we really don't want to hear. We must show respect, or I think we will find ourselves in contempt of God.
Yeah, I think God's definitely trying to make that point as well, that God's messengers will be respected and the message that they bring will be respected as well. Okay, in the time that we have left here, we're going to look in chapter 3, and it's another alliance between Israel and Judah during the rebellion of Moab. So immediately after Ahab dies, Moab, who has been in subjugation to Israel, they rebel, and they no longer do that. And as I said, there was a lot of overlap between Ahab and Ahaziah's short 2 years. Ahaziah doesn't appear to do anything or have time to do anything about that. So his brother Jehoram is going to try to do that. Jehoram's going to reign for 12 years. He's going to be a little bit different than his brother and his father. It says he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and mother. He put away the Baals. He's not going to worship the pagan gods anymore, or the pagan god Baal anymore, rather, but he's still clinging to this sin of Jeroboam, the golden calves there in Dan and Bethel. God is not going to be pleased with him, but he's at least putting away the Baal worship. Moab rebels. Moab kind of has a rough political, quite a bit of unrest at this particular point in time. They're rebelling against Israel. They're going to join with Ammon and some of the men of Mount Seir when we read the account of the southern kingdom there in 2 Chronicles and attempt to invade Judah. So they seem to be causing trouble at this particular time. And so Jehoram comes and he asks his old father's friend Jehoshaphat. He says, "You want to help me put down this rebellion?" It says, "The king of Moab has rebelled against me. will you go with me to fight against Moab? And this is Jehoshaphat. I will go up. I am as you are. My people are as your people. My horses as your horses. Does that sound familiar? It sounds all too familiar, doesn't it? Jehoshaphat has been down this road before with the same question. He's given the same answer. He had disastrous results before, and he faced a rebuke, as Brad mentioned, from Jehu the prophet. And yet, here he is again. It seems like this is just a fatal flaw with him to have an alliance with this family. And he says, yes, I will go. I will go to battle with you. And they make the decision that they're going to go around. Don't have the map up for this. Go around the south side of the Dead Sea through the wilderness of Edom, and that's how they're going to attack Moab. And when they do that, they're there for 7 days, and they find out there's no water there, and they're struggling, and they don't know what to do. So what does Jehoshaphat suggest? This would be question number 7 in your material. What does Jehoshaphat suggest with regard to what they should do in the situation they're in?
Very wise thing. Inquire of the Lord.
Yeah, he says, is there someone we can inquire from the Lord from? And one of Jehoram's servants, he says, that Elisha is in the area. Let's ask him. And so they do that. I would like to look at this I just find this interesting in this interaction. And again, this kind of ties in with what we talked about with Jehoshaphat and God being willing to help him in his distress from the battle there when he was in alliance with Ahab against Syria as well. Look at the difference between the king of Israel, how he feels, how he perceives God and God's watchfulness over him, versus how Jehoshaphat looks at God and what that relationship is there. The first thing that the king of Israel jumps to is he says, alas, for the Lord has called these 3 kings to give them into the hand of Moab. Jehoshaphat, the first thing he wants to do is say, isn't there a prophet of the Lord that we may inquire of the Lord by him, so we can find out how to get out of this situation. And then when Elisha comes and he says, what do I have to do with you? You can, king of Israel, you can go talk to the gods of, or the prophets of your mother and of your father. And again, the first thing that Jehoram points out, he says, no, the Lord has called these 3 kings together to give them into the hand of Israel. And Elisha, what he has to say is telling as well, as the Lord of hosts live before whom I stand, were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look at you or see you. So there's a stark contrast here between how God is dealing with Israel and how God is dealing with Judah. And again, that goes back to one of our overlying principles of the quarter here is God is rewarding those that are faithful to him. He has care for those that are faithful to him. And those that are not are going to be punished. They're not going to receive the same blessings that those that are faithful would. I just found that to be interesting there. And that's a history with Jehoram's family there as you think about Ahab as, is this you, O troubler of Israel? How he hated Micaiah because the things that Micaiah would say there. So there's this pattern within Ahab's family and within the northern kingdom of not trusting the Lord when they're bringing that on themselves. So they bring Elisha, and what does Elisha have to say?
If I could back up to the point you were just making.
Sure.
You're right. He has not gotten to the point where he trusts in the Lord. And those verses make that clear. Ahab, on the other hand, called the 400 prophets. These are 400 false prophets. And they are the prophets who told Ahab what he wanted to hear. And I don't like Micaiah because he doesn't tell me the stuff I like to hear. It seemed like Ahab would have learned that what Micaiah said does come true. And what the 400 false prophets say does not, but he just liked to hear their word. But here we see Jehoram seems to, like Elisha said, go call the same prophets. What are you calling me for? Go call the prophets your parents called. But he at least, I don't know if he has, he was not, it specifically said, not as bad as his father and his mother. That's an interesting thing. not as bad as his father and mother, because usually it said not like his father did.
Yeah.
But Jezebel is called out. So anyway, I'm just seeing a little bit of a contrast. He's nowhere near where he needs to be. I'm not making that point.
Yeah.
But he does seem to disown some of his parents' ways.
Yeah.
He's not as bad as what Ahab is, but he still definitely has a negative connotation towards the God of Israel and what the God of Israel can do for him, or what he thinks the God of Israel is doing to him on purpose. So the kings were given an answer of how they could get out of trouble. It says, make the valley full of trenches, and there won't be rain, there won't be wind, but the valley will be full of water by morning. And then if that's but a slight thing, that's easy for me to do, I'm also going to give the Moabites into your hand. And when I give them into your hand, I want you to strike the cities, fell the trees, spike the water, mar the land. I want you to make things really bad for the people of Moab. And he goes, that's the instructions that he gives. And when they wake up in the morning, sure enough, the water is full of trenches. The Moabites, young and old, are amassed on the border, and they are waiting to attack, and they see the sun coming up, and they see the sun reflecting on the water. They see it as blood. They think that they have turned on themselves, and they to the spoil Moab, and they all run. But of course, Israel and Judah and Edom are all there waiting for them, and they attack, and they defeat them greatly, and they do all of the things that God has asked them to do. So much so that the king of Moab is pinned back in the capital city, and he tries to break out to the king of Edom with 700 men. He's not able to do that, so he takes his eldest son, and it says he sacrifices him on the wall. And at the end of chapter 3, this is verse 27, then he took the oldest son who was to reign in his place and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. And there came great wrath against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. Again, like, Brad brought up the point about Elisha going to Carmel and then to Samaria. Why are we given that detail? What is that? I think this is another one of these verses where it's not particularly clear as far as what the wrath against Israel was or the reason for it. Most of the time when that phrase is used in other places, it's wrath that is coming from God. So the best that I have read was Kyle and Delix. They spoke about maybe Israel had just pushed too far in their pursuit of the king and forced him to that action of trying to sacrifice his own son, and that was something that was abominable. But I think that's just speculation of a commentary. But again, one of those things where I'm not sure what the language is saying there, other than there was wrath against Israel, and Israel departed after God gave them this great victory. Any comments or questions there about this battle against Moab?
I think one thing we can see is that when God blesses the righteous, sometimes the wicked benefit as well.
In that Israel is benefiting from God blessing Judah. Is that what you're saying? Trevor?
It's interesting that both in this case as well as what we saw earlier with the command to take Syria and to deal with Ben-Hadad, that God seems to be using this nation to execute justice and judgment and vengeance on these neighboring nations. And they're not altogether succeeding in that. They're not faithful in that. And so it's interesting to look forward to other empires that are going to come in later years and work God's will and judgment on these other nations at that time. So this is just being postponed.
Yep. Anything else?
If there's anything that indicates to me that perhaps this wrath against Israel is from God and not simply a stirring up of the people of Moab. You can imagine it could be, well, here this king has sacrificed his son, and that somehow rallies his troops. I'm not convinced that's it. But back up a few verses where it says that they stopped up all the springs of water, cut down all the trees, but they left the stones of Kir Hareseth intact. So it's almost as if they pulled their punches on this one because they wanted to own the city, because they wanted to use the king as a pride. I don't know, but Perhaps that's some indication as to God's wrath. You didn't fully follow my command, and so I'm going to withdraw my hand and let the tables be turned on you.
That's a good observation. I hadn't thought of that. Anything else? Just a few applications and practical points there as we finish up in the last couple of minutes. First of all, since we do have a couple of minutes, go back to Elijah. As we, put him in the picture of the whole Bible story, what New Testament character do we relate Elijah to? John the Baptist, right? John the Baptist. And so we can see in some ways, the similar functions that they were performing there. We see Elijah there in chapter 18 as he's there on Mount Carmel, and he says, "How long will you hesitate?" As he speaks to an apostate people, "How long will you hesitate between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him." And then he goes on to paint the contrast, and the people didn't answer him a word there. And we see John there in Luke chapter 1, as he's prophesied to, as the angel speaks to his father about who this man will be. He says, "It is he who will go forth as a forerunner before him in the spirit and power of Elijah." And what's he going to do? He's going to turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children, and the disobedient to the attitude of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. A little bit earlier in chapter 18 of 1 Kings there, as Ahab says, "Is that you, O trouble of Israel?" And Elijah's response is, "No, you are the one that's in authority, and you're the one that's causing trouble for Israel because of how you're behaving and the path that you're leading them on. I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, because you have forsaken the commandment of the Lord. And in this case, you have followed the Baals." And then we see John in chapter 3 and verse 7, he says, he begins saying to the crowds who were going out, and we would see him speaking to the leadership as well, "Who, you brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come?" So we can see the similarity between the mission of Elijah in this dark hour of the northern kingdom's history, as he's there trying desperately to bring the people back. And then we see John as people that are not ready to accept the coming Christ. He's there trying to prepare the way and make them ready for that. So any comments there about the contrast or the comparison between Elijah and John and the ways that they would be similar?
Yeah, the verse on the left about Elijah, and this is to the king. He is bold in confronting the king. John is also bold in confronting those in power. Elijah ran. He was under threat of his life, and he ran and he got away. John did not.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we can definitely see that Elijah is kind of a shadow of what John would be, and see that string as it pulls through the Bible story there. So keep those kind of connections in mind as we go along. Any other comments there? I think we just have a minute or so left. So, all right. Well, again, be mindful of the themes that are and principles that are constantly running through these stories of God rewarding faithfulness and punishing unfaithfulness, being careful with God's word, and the fact of the cost of obedience, but God is willing to protect. All right. Thank you for your comments.